Welcome to Redefining Engagement. I'm Francesca Dumar, Director of Audience Development and Strategy at Contribui. And in this show, I speak to leaders and innovators in the media industry so that we can bring tips, wisdom, ideas, and even some things to avoid so that we can all do more engagement better. So without further ado, let's move on to our next guest. Hi, Jeremy. Thank you so much for joining Redefining Engagement. I'm really excited to have a chat with you. We've worked together and spoken a lot, and you have a massive range of experience. Would you mind starting by telling me, a little bit about you, a little bit about your experience, maybe?
Hi, Francesca. Yeah, great to see you again. And thanks for inviting me on the podcast. So my background is very much in news. I have far too many years in the news industry, about 35 years, where I edited numerous titles in the UK, and then I was the editor-in-chief of two of the largest publishers in the UK as well. And that was all about, defining digital strategies and restructuring newsrooms. More latterly, I now work for myself. I have my own business. I'm a media consultant, a media advisor. And what I do is I help businesses on their digital transformation journey. And chiefly that's about helping them to understand what it takes to create the right sort of content that helps them to move from a scale-based business to one where they interact and engage with their audiences and develop a subscription basis. So the subscription business is still pretty new for the regional industry, and that's where I do a lot of my work. And I've been working with my partner, Alistair Lewis, for maybe 18 months now, with about 12 to 15 publishers, helping them to move into that digital space and with subscriptions. The chief thing I specialize in is in user needs. So I'm an exponent of the user needs strategy, working globally, actually. So we do quite a lot of work in Singapore and in Europe with some brands around how to use user needs as a way of increasing your engagement, improving your engagement with readers. And then the last bit I do is that I'm an AI consultant. So I do some work with publishers around the world in helping them just to get started with AI. They think it's a big problem, a big subject, and they don't know how to really get into it. So me and a fellow partner, we work on some just to starter packs on how to really just take that first few steps into how to use AI.
You do so much.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit. Which one do you find the most challenging?
Oh, the most challenging, I think, is the user needs side of it. And that's because when people talk about user needs and say, yeah, we do user needs, and you then start asking the questions, what they don't really look at is how they change their journalism. So they may understand, what an update me story is or an educate me story, but what have they really worked with their journalists in their newsrooms to change the way that they present the stories, how they research the stories, and how they distribute it as well. So it's about getting into that whole mindset that says, okay, well, you've done a bit of change, but you haven't really done the whole change mindset that you need to, and go into your newsrooms and really challenge yourself in the way that you produce your content.
So it's more the people problem, the getting people to think about it differently, not necessarily that leads to the change of content.
Yeah, definitely. It's about moving people from the way that you traditionally think about your journalism to a different approach, when you really understand what the user is coming to you for, what the audience is coming to you for, and that's going to be different for different brands as well. And so what we tend to do now is we go right back to the beginning and say, okay, so what's your purpose? What's your mission as a brand? And if you haven't done that work, then you won't really be able to understand what your user need model should be.
Interesting. And you've obviously worked in a lot of newsrooms and with a lot of newsrooms. So I'm really quite keen to hear your point of view of what audience engagement means to you. What is audience engagement to you?
Yeah, it's a good starting point, really. Audience engagement is it's more emotional now than just getting people to your website and getting them to stay on your website. In the past, it was about just getting them to come and measuring your clicks, and we thought, okay, that was a good level of reader engagement. But it's far, far more than that now. It's about how do you foster loyalty? How do you build trust with your reader? How can you build that sense of community around your content so that they understand what you're doing, they like what you're doing, and they're going to come back to you more. And to me, I think true engagement is when the audiences feel heard, and they feel valued, and they know that they've been understood. And when your content generally resonates with their needs and their values, that's when I think you are really getting into what user engagement and reader engagement is all about.
My God, that is such a good definition. But also, it sounds like it's something that's extremely hard to measure, which we always focus on, this measuring side. You just mentioned like what you used to think it was, and it's clicks, so easy to measure. How would you say we measure this feeling heard, feeling valued, feeling understood?
It's really hard to get those measurements right. And I think there's so many measurements out there to try to focus on the ones which I think are right for your brand. So if you are, let's say, if you are Reach, for example, the Reach newspapers and that business, that level of engagement that you're after is going to be different from one if you are a more subscription-based business, and so therefore your metrics are going to be different. So if you're Reach, you want to, you're going to measure the returning visitors. You are going to measure your click rates, etc. You are going to measure your time on site, etc. So they're pretty much the superficial engagement metrics that you've got. How do you measure that loyalty and that trust? That's really difficult, and I think you need more sentiment type of measurements for that, which are really quite difficult to put your finger on. I don't think we as an industry have cracked that, so I'm struggling to answer that question because actually I don't think we have those metrics in place just yet. If you are more of a subscription business, then the metrics are a little easier, and I think the way I would describe it is that we've moved from a passive way of measuring engagement to a more active way. So before we measured it by page views, time on site, etc. Now I think it's more deeper involvement. So the way that I look at it would be maybe, the level of commenting that you've got. Is your content being shared? Have you got people subscribing, or have you got people interacting with you in any way? Have you fostered this sense of community? So have you got people coming to you all the time and engaging, asking you questions, and you're responding to them? So those are some things which you really need to get into to try to get some kind of measure in terms of, okay, are you providing value to them? So I don't think there's a direct, this is how you measure value and it's X metric. I think there's a number of metrics that go towards that says, okay, well, if we've got a lot of commenting and sharing and interaction and engagement, etc., then I think people are valuing what we're producing.
It's difficult because it's so hard when we haven't got a direct measurement to also measure return on investment. And so when I ask this question, which is, what aims does your audience engagement strategy deliver on? It's not necessarily directly return on investment, but what would you say it is?
Well, I think it depends what the aim of your business is as well. So if you are, as I say, if you're a scale model, then your aims of engagement are going to be different. So you want volume, you want people coming, lots of people coming, spending time on your site and looking at many pages. If you are not in the scale game and you're in about if you're trying to drive revenue from your audience through subscriptions and through registration, then your metrics are going to be different, and they're going to be very much about, okay, well, are they, have they, first of all, have they engaged, have they registered with you? You may want to use email newsletters as an engagement tool. So therefore, have they signing up to your emails? Are they opening your emails? Are they clicking through on the stories, etc.? It depends really in terms of what your business model is, in what engagement metric you're going to use. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. It would be really useful to have specific examples. Have you ever seen it done well by anyone in all of your consulting time that you've been going on?
Have I seen them measure it well, or have I seen them engage?
Yeah, or engage well as well. Any of those are really useful.
Yeah.
I'm quite pushy with real examples sometimes because I think it really gives an image of what could we be doing, or inspires, definitely.
Yeah, I think so. So, if I look at the Daily Telegraph as an example, they've got a really complicated but effective engagement model. It's called the STARS model, and their journalists know. So they're not measured by subscription; they're measured by engagement, and they know if they've got people spending time on their site, and they're interacting with them. But I think that's although it's a good model, I think it's quite complicated, and so I think from a journalist point of view, you need to keep it really simple for the journalist. So when you move from measuring your engagement by page views, and then you take that away and say, okay, well, now we want to measure it by people subscribing, all of a sudden the number of views you get on your content plummets because you're driven by getting 1,000, 2,000 page views on your story. Once you've got a subscriber, you're down in the hundreds. And so therefore, from the journalist's point of view, saying, well, is my content being successful? Is it being read wide enough? So, but the key thing about it is that your engagement level is really important. So if people are, if they're coming back to your content and that type of content, and then you understand why they're coming to you, then you change your whole content plan to produce more of that type of content. So engagement isn't just about measuring, how long they're coming to, or how long they're spending time on your site. It's about, okay, well, how do you change your content plan, knowing why they're coming to you, and then producing the right type of content. So as I said at the beginning, to me, engagement is about making sure that your content resonates with your audience and you're producing the right type of content. It's less about, the sheer numbers. It's about the type of content you're producing. And so as an example for that, I'm working with, a national newspaper at the moment down in London, and we've done a lot of work with a sports team. And the sports team were producing a load of content, which quite frankly was being measured by clicks, and a lot of that content wasn't landing with their audience. We then did a lot of work that says, okay, well, what do you want to be known for? So this is about going back to your mission, your purpose. And so we said, okay, well, look, maybe there's 2 or 3 really big sports that you want to be known for. And so we then invested time and energy about the user needs approach to that, to say, okay, well, look, it's not about update me type stories. This is about giving you perspective and educating the audience about certain issues around sports. And what we found was that their subscription business quadrupled over 6 months.
Wow.
So that's when you get that ROI that comes back into it, because they were relatively successful in their subscriptions, but when they really focused on, okay, so what are the readers coming to them for, then they saw a real growth in the level of subscriptions and engagement they got from the audience.
What would you say are the biggest hurdles or challenges in your experience? What do you think is stopping these news brands, even these different teams, from engaging better?
Well, I think it's important first to say that I think engagement has improved massively over time. And, I think we've got news brands who really understand the value, or beginning to understand the value of engagement rather than just volume. And so I think that's really important to recognise that first. The hurdles, though, are, well, if I think about it, I think it's more about, first off, is that I think we've been in very much a broadcast mode. So for many years, we've had the luxury of just being able to put content out there, expecting people to read it, and because we didn't have the data and analytics, we just put it out there, and we didn't have much interaction. Now you've got a lot of new entrants in the media market. The media landscape's changed completely, and you've got let's take influencers as an example. They're absolutely brilliant at engaging with their audience. But the challenge that we have as a more traditional media is that we're still pretty much very much based in what I would call like the church and state relationship. So we are very much based on the content's got to be objective. We've got to be almost like a different language that we use. It's more corporate in the way that we present stories, and it's very factual and it's pyramid based in terms of what we do. And so therefore, to engage with the audience becomes quite a hurdle now, because the audience is changing and they want to have more emotion in the content. They want to have more feelings expressed, which is why influencers are doing so well. The challenge that influencers have is they cloud that integrity of fact-based journalism with their opinion. And we as more traditional media brands struggle to do that, because we're very much we are fact checks. We have that integrity, we have that authenticity around it, and so that's a really big challenge to try to navigate what the audiences are getting from elsewhere, from social media explosion, etc., to the way that we traditionally presented our news.
Huge challenge. Have you seen any brands that are approaching that in quite a good way, like going over that emotional barrier or managing to do that in a way that keeps their integrity?
Yeah, well, I've got to say, mostly no. I don't think there is an awful lot of that, and I think people are still wrestling with that balance. But you do see it beginning to creep into what I would say almost like the personalization of news. So and the making heroes of your correspondents, for example. So you've got the BBC do this really well. So you've got people like Michelle Hussein, who's just left the BBC to go to Bloomberg, but it was very much you built your brand around your key broadcasters, and I think the BBC do that relatively well in terms of building that personality profile that you have with news, and to a certain extent you can do that you can see it happening in certain elements of the news brand. So you've got your columnists, so they're beginning to be far more personable and using social media now to project themselves, etc. And I think the future for that will be to help to make them more become the influencers of your brand. So when you've got your football correspondents, you've got your political experts, etc., I think that's when you can start to really you give them the platform. They can do podcasts like we're doing here, or they can do Q&As, etc., so that they can move beyond their written word and use social media technologies and platforms to become more engaging. And I think that's where they need to get to. I think we're beginning to see it, but I wouldn't say that I could name any brand that's doing it really well at the moment.
It's quite a scary thing to do, because you're linking your brand to key people who could leave, but also you're asking quite a lot from your team. Hiring for that is a whole different spectrum, and we're almost expecting our journalists and our team to have all of these skills that are probably not necessarily native to some of the people, but also quite natural to a lot of our younger teams. What kind of training are we even thinking about when we're thinking of this? It must be an absolute minefield to go down that road.
Yeah, you take me back to when I was the editor of the Sheffield Star, and we had a really good columnist, and this was about 15 years ago now, and maybe 20 even, and Twitter wasn't as big as it is now. And I went to one of our columnists and I said, I want you to have a Twitter account. And he said, why? And I said, because you're a really good columnist and you should be talking about, what you're writing in the column and present yourself. He said, no, I don't want anyone to know who I am. I said, well, you're a columnist, so people know who you are. And, that was really just sort of sums up the challenge that we're facing a little bit, in that, so we've got these people who come into our industry and they want to write great journalism, etc. But our audiences want more from them now. They want to understand who they are. They want to know, more about their lifestyles. They want them to be more personable rather than corporate. And this columnist just refused to do it. He just wouldn't open a Twitter account. And obviously, it's changed massively now, and everyone has an X account or a Twitter account or Blue Sky or whatever you want to call it now. But we just expect our journalists to be very good at suddenly becoming a personality within the news brand, and we don't really give them an awful lot of training. And so what sort of training do you need to give them? Well, we're very good at giving media training to external organizations, how to speak to camera, how to do radio, how to do podcasts without always hesitating or stammering or saying all the time. And we don't do an awful lot of training for that. And I still don't think we're very good at that as an industry. So the first thing I would do is I would make them comfortable in using social media platforms. The world is moving really fast again back to video and TikTok and YouTube, etc. We don't give them any training on how to present themselves on TikTok or on YouTube. And so therefore, I think we should really do some really good media training to enable people to move from the written word to the broadcast word. And I don't think we're very good at that.
Oh, I'll take you up on that training any day. It'd be great. It's great in there.
I've never had it, and you can tell by that. So,
I wouldn't say I could tell, but I'd definitely be up for a training like that. And I think a lot of people would, especially going into it. They know there's this expectation. It's just quite a scary thing, and it's always fear that stops us from doing things, isn't it? Yeah,
I think so, but I also think that post-COVID, people are far more comfortable now with using Zoom calls or video calls, etc. So if you think about where we've taken people from where they were only 3 years ago, we always used to do conference calls and never saw anyone's faces, but now we're always on, and your face is always on a screen, and you're always talking in these types of meetings. And so I think we're beginning to change and evolve our the way that we communicate anyway. And so I think it's just a natural progression then to start to put that into some kind of professional development that's, as people, if you want to make them a hero brand within your organization, then give them better training on how to present yourself on video.
Well, let's talk a little bit about strategies maybe and best practices, and focus a little bit on this engaging audiences. What are there any strategies that have proven, or what are the strategies that have proven most effective in engaging audiences in your experience?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of strategies, let's talk about where you need to start, really. So the first thing is that introducing data into your newsrooms is got to be the first part of your strategy. And most newsrooms now do use data. So you've got Chartbeat or you've got Parsley, so you've got real-time analytics. And that's really useful because people can then see what content is actually resonating with their audience. The next step from that is, well, how do you then start to integrate that into the way that you commission your content and how you plan your content? So that's definitely a piece of work that still needs to be done. That says, okay, well, this type of content is working. So part of the strategy must be, let's stop doing the content which isn't working so well. And letting go of that content is really is quite a challenge in newsrooms and journalists because they like to do what's within their comfort zone or news that's coming in. But so you've got to be brave enough to say, okay, well, look, we're not going to do this type of content anymore. We want to do more of this new content because we know that's resonating. So how you use data in your newsroom is one of the first parts of your strategy. The second then is how do you put that into a content plan? And then you communicate that to your journalists. It says, okay, right, we need to be producing this volume of content on these topic areas to really be successful in engaging with our audience. So that's just from a content point of view. The second part then, I think, from your engagement side is, okay, well, how are people interacting with us? And what platforms have we got that enable people to do that? So National World, for example, have introduced the Your World platform, which enables people to post their videos and their comments and their stories on their platform. Your own platform, Francesca, Contribly, is one of those as well. So it allows people to engage it's more community funded or crowdsourced type of content. And we've got to get better at how we engage with those audiences in asking them for content and then using it on our sites. Mm. So if I give you an example, when I was the deputy editor of Leicester Mercury many years ago, this is about 25 years ago now, we asked people for their thoughts on some campaign that we were doing. And we got loads of comments come in. We got loads of letters. It's a time before really email was really much of a thing. And I went to our news desk and said, how did that call for information go? They said, great. We've got about 35 to 50 responses. I said, great. What are you doing with it? What do you mean? What are we doing with it? I said, well, we've got 35 to 50 people who've taken the effort to write to us with their views. We've got to find a way of publishing it in a paper. And they hadn't thought about that at all. Now, as I said, we've moved an awful long way from that. But I think, modern day, in terms of the way that people want to engage with us, whether that's through WhatsApp or whether it's through commenting on our websites, etc., I think we've got to develop a strategy around that says, okay, well, how do we capture all of this content? How do we reach out to people and bring it back into our brands? Because it comes back to, my definition of engagement is that you've got to build that community of trust and value around the content you're producing.
And it's interesting because it's thinking through that value exchange for the reader, isn't it? It's about, you saying, well, what are you going to do with that content? Which, right, hopefully now not that many people are thinking that way, and I'm sure they are. I think there are probably a lot of brands who do get stuck on, oh, we've done this and it was great, and don't necessarily use it all. But hopefully part of the process is thinking through what does the reader experience, because that's what all of these big social media brands are doing. They're constantly thinking of what dopamine hit, what feeling are our audience going to get from engaging with this.
Yeah.
And at what point in the process do you think that we should be thinking about this audience engagement? How should it be taking shape?
Right at the very start. Because if I go back to what I've said before, previously we were a broadcast media, we just used to put content out there and hope that people would find it and read it. That day's gone. We've got so many competitors in the marketplace now who are expert at how they engage with their audiences, that we as media brands can be seen as pretty out of date and pretty aloof, because we're not really understanding how to engage with the audiences in a way that they want to be engaged with and communicated with. So you've got to do it right at the beginning of the process. So when you're planning your content, you need to start thinking about, okay, well, how are we going to reach out to our audience to let them know that we're doing it, to give them an opportunity to comment on it, to, is that via Q&As? Is it, when you're doing a live blog, can we allow people to comment on that live blog? Should we be producing video? And when we're doing that, should we have, what sort of sentiment tools have we got that we can use that we can use for people to communicate with us? You've got to think about all those sorts of things. Are you going to ask people to engage with it, or are you just going to shut it off? So if, one of the things we have is that when you write court reports, you're not going to open your commenting on for that, but most other stories you're going to. So how do you then start to, ask people for their feedback and invite that feedback to come in, and then how do you use it? So, and all of that thinking has got to happen at the beginning of the content creation process.
And who should be thinking about this? Because different teams, different structures. Is it everyone? Should you have someone that is like pushing that agenda? Because it is a big cultural change to start thinking in this way. In an ideal world, how does it look?
Yeah, I think you've got different elements in your newsroom. So, if you've got a newsletter team, so they'll be thinking about it. But I think it really rests with your social team, your social media team, because they're the ones who are the experts in, they've got all the knowledge of what platforms and how to use the platforms, etc. So I think it needs to rest with them. But let's not make the mistake we made when digital came along and we set up, one or two people as digital experts, and they were the ones who managed all the digital uploading. We've seen that a little bit with AI as well. So you're getting AI experts in your newsroom, but it's not being spread to everyone to be able to use it. So the democratization of it is really important. So everyone should have the responsibility of thinking about how they're engaging with your audience, but you do need some experts within your newsroom as well who know how to use the platforms. Which sort of reminds me of one of your early questions in terms of what are the barriers that we've got and one of the hurdles that we face in our newsrooms. Part of the barriers that we've got is that we don't own our own social engagement media platforms, and so therefore we might invest a lot of time in how to use, let's say, Facebook. So we spent a lot of resource and a lot of time in how do we build up a Facebook community, and then Facebook then decide to take their bat away and deprioritize news, and all of a sudden we've lost a massive audience there. And you can so now we're shifting to Instagram and we're shifting to TikTok to build that audience engagement as well. But because we don't own those platforms, we don't know what the future is going to look like. Snapchat, everyone was working on, thinking, okay, we need to be on Snapchat. Well, Snapchat just has been proven not to work for a lot of media organizations. And so therefore, one of the barriers is because we don't own our own technology, we're reliant on others to do it. And so therefore, you're always going to be at the mercy of their whim and their algorithms and how they're going to promote your content.
It's difficult because owning your own technology sounds great, but it's very expensive. It's a massive job. We don't necessarily share particularly well between media brands across the country, even the continent. And once you've done it, you need a lot of expertise in your teams as well. Are there other ways, or have you seen ways that audiences can interact directly with the editorial teams or together on these platforms, and it's not necessarily like so technological? There's not so much emphasis on that tech.
Yeah, there's some really simple stuff that people can do and should do, really. So yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm not making a case that we should develop our own platforms. It's just it is a hurdle and a barrier that we face. But if I give you an example of some really really good example, a really good case study of how to engage with your audience. So when I was the editor-in-chief at Arch, and one of the titles we owned was Norwich Evening News, and we created an app for the Norwich Evening News, and one of the most successful parts of their coverage was their football coverage, and had a really good Norwich City reporter who had a massive following. They did a really good podcast, and so they did everything right. And then we took their content and we put it behind a paywall, effectively, and so therefore they saw, as I say, their measures of success. Page views went through the floor, but for us as a business, we saw great growth because we're now making money through Reader Revenue and charging them. I think it's £2 a month to have access to the content. But what we, as part of the value exchange that we had with that, was that the Norwich City reporter had a Q&A on a Monday with Norwich City fans, and because they'd registered to be on the app, you suddenly got a greater quality of conversation coming from those people. So when I was at the Sheffield Star, you had lots of vitriol and lots of trolling from the Sheffield United and Sheffield Wednesday fans who were just insulting each other on the platforms.
Surprise!
Yeah, absolutely. But because in Norwich, people had to register, and they then knew that the Norwich City reporter was going to be hosting a Q&A between 1 and 2 on a Monday morning after the weekend's match. You had some really great engagements, really good conversations. And those were people who kept on coming back to that call each week. So in terms of, when we talked about, so how do you measure trust and value and that sort of thing? It's not a direct correlation between, okay, trust and there's the trust metric, but you've built trust because people know that they've got a safe environment where they can ask questions. They've got direct access to a journalist, which, we underestimate the power of the journalist. So for someone to have a one-on-one conversation with the journalist, they love it, because the journalists, they've got access to the players and the manager that the fans just don't have. And so to have that Q&A and ask him what he thinks went wrong on Saturday, and who do you think is going to be fielding the next week, etc., was a huge engagement success for that brand. So yeah, to answer your question in a very long way there, it's a really simple thing. It can be on a phone call, it can be on a podcast like this, or a webcast. Really simple technology you can use to ask questions.
I absolutely love that example. That is such a good one, and it is so simple, and it does. You could quite easily measure that sentiment in it, and that's so important.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced or seen any engagement that's genuinely surprised you by any chance?
Yeah, let me take you back to one. So it relates to me, actually. So when I first became editor of one of the titles, I decided that I was going to meet the readers. And so I got it. So we were talking with the newspaper sales team at the time, and we decided to get a big red sofa, and we put it in the heart of the shopping centre. And we said, okay, come and meet the editor on Saturday morning. And my circulation manager said, "You're mad. They're going to kill you." I said, "No, why should they do that?" He said, "Well, do you not know, how people feel about your newspaper?" I said, "Oh, I just don't believe it." So we then we advertised it in the paper, and we put this big red sofa in the heart of Kettering Town Centre, and we invited people to come and sit on the sofa and talk to the editor. And we had a queue of people just wanted to talk, and the mayor came. They wanted to chat, and it was just a really good example of being human and taking the role of the editor and saying, "I'm going to come out and meet you," rather than just to expect that the office of the editor is this cardboard figure, etc. So let's show some of the human side of it, the personality that you've got. And yeah, so it was such a success. We then did it on subsequent months in different towns around the area.
Love.
I had one person who came up to me. It's a Saturday morning down in Wellingborough, and he was an old guy, and he said, "I'd like a word with you." I said, "Great, come and sit down." He said, "No, I don't want to sit down." I said, "Okay, well, how can I help you? What would you like to talk about?" He said, "I'd like to know why you're not wearing a tie."
Oh.
I said, that was my reaction too. I said, "What do you mean, why I'm not wearing a tie?" And he said, "Well, you're the editor of the Evening Telegraph. I expect you to be wearing a tie." And I said, "Well, it's a Saturday morning. It's in a shopping centre, so I thought I would just, dress more casually." He said, "That's not what I expect from the role of an editor of the Evening Telegraph." But, the thing about it is that, when you work for a brand or a news brand, your readers think they've got some ownership over that brand, because it's unlike, a lot of other businesses. They feel like, because it's part of their lives. You come through their letterbox every single day, in those days, but, you're on their screen. So people think they've got some kind of ownership. And so therefore that's a huge element of trust that you've got, that you should really try to build on and nurture and develop. And I think that's the lesson that I would take forward from that says, okay, by interacting with people, being prepared to meet them where they want to be met, which is what young people want, the younger generation wants, and we're not very good at that. But I think we need to learn those sorts of lessons, and learn how to engage with people in a way that they want to be engaged with.
I can't even tell you how much I love that example. I agree. I think you should be wearing a tie right now, Jeremy.
I did think about it.
Well, touching back onto that point that you just made on trust, and looking at the recent Reuters School of Journalism report, and it highlighted, that high standards and a transparent report approach, and that people are expecting this lack of bias and fairness in terms of media representation.
Mm.
Do you have any strategies or things that you think that we should be doing to push that more? That is one particularly amazing example. Are there other things that we could be doing that will allow us to attract new audiences or demographics?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's loads of examples out there of what people are doing. So if you think about, let's take the BBC for example. BBC did Your Voice, Your View. So they launched in, I think it's about October last year. This it was a surprising thing where they no, it's earlier than that. It's certainly in 2024 though, where they started to reach out to their audiences and say, okay, well, we're going to be covering this piece of content, or we're covering the election, general election. Tell us what questions you like us to ask. And that's a really big departure for the BBC, who coming down from their ivory tower, if you like, and engaging with audience by saying, you tell us what questions you want us to ask. So they do that really well. People who, and then you've got The Guardian, who've launched their young reporter thing. So where they're effectively engaging with a younger audience, by going out and effectively asking them or giving them advice about how to vote, young people's issues, etc. So you're engaging in that way. You've got the New York Times, who've created their recipe app, so they're trying to engage with the new audience by sharing cooking tips and those sorts of things. So you've got a lot of examples out there as to what people are doing and what they're trying. And then you've got if you go back to the Guardians is the young adult platform, that's what it's called. And that's about, it was targeting students and first-time voters and covering issues such as climate change and that sort of thing. So I think where we have to go to is that we need to, from the Reuters report, is we need to invest in product, and we need to create new products for new audiences. We can't expect to reach people off our fairly staid, maybe boring, type of, the brands that we've got at the moment. I think if we're trying to engage with different audiences, we're going to need different types of products and platforms to be able to do that effectively.
That actually leads on really, really well to talking a little bit about tech. And obviously your experience in AI is really useful on that. What role do you think technology like AI and data analytics is going to play, or is playing already, in our audience engagement efforts? Where do you see it going?
Oh God, it's huge.
Huge.
It's massively huge in terms of, even if you just go down to the most basic thing of using AI through personalization. So, in the past, it was pretty much a one size fits all. Here's your content. And that's all one platform. But if you went to one website and I went to the same website, Francesca, you would have a completely different type of content served up to you than I would. Yours would be far more lively, dynamic, fun, that sort of thing. Mine would be far more news and sport. But that's the difference now, is that AI is doing and has been doing for quite some time, and it will only get better. There's a risk in personalization because, if all you get served up is stuff which they know that you're interested in because they're tracking you through algorithms, then you won't get exposed to other opinions and other viewpoints, etc. So that is a risk on personalization. But let's just park that for one moment. But the technologies now that is at our fingertips in terms of how we can understand what people are coming to our sites for, make it easier for them to find it, and then serve it up in the volumes and the formats that they're expecting, is a massive evolution in the way that we engage with people. And secondly, I was at an AI conference last year. Sorry, we are only in January. I was at an AI conference last year, and there's Ezra Aman was talking about liquid content. And what he means by liquid content is that, you can have one piece of content, but with AI coming on stream now, you can, it won't be very long before you can choose what format you want that content to consume. So I might want it in text. You may well want it on video. Someone else may want that content on audio, etc. So, and that's how AI is going to personalize the content now. So that liquid content is something which I heard for the first time last year. I think we're going to hear that phrase or those two words more and more through 25 and 2026, because that's really is personalization in terms of not only the type of content, but the format that you choose that you want to consume it with.
I find it really interesting, going back to what you were saying about that personalization. We get these, there's a lot of debate around, or worry around, personalization is only going to feed you the same kind of content again and again, and you're not going to necessarily, get the news and the information that you want. And I sat on the train, I think it was maybe a few weeks ago, and I am a millennial. Like I'm social native. I've always had social media. And yet this group of girls that were sitting next to me were talking in depth about how often they reset their algorithm. And the fact that this was a conversation I found extremely interesting, because everybody knows that the algorithm is feeding them certain things, and they almost expect the personalization, but they also expect to be able to restart it, because I used to be a teacher. The content I used to get was all teacher content, and I'd be so surprised. We swap social medias between our friends all the time to see what everyone else is getting.
Yeah.
And I find that really interesting as well, because we talk about personalization from our point of view, from as a news brand, but actually our audience is probably seeing it from a completely different point of view of what they expect the tools to do that we're creating. It's not really a question, just a comment that I thought I'd throw in there, but I find it fascinating.
I've never heard of being able to reset your algorithm. I wouldn't even know how to do it. So,
apparently, yeah. Oh, well, apparently you can go into your settings and make it reset. And apparently dating apps do the same thing. I found out recently, I got a TikTok saying, if you feel like you're getting rubbish people, you can reset your tool to start giving you the good stuff again. And I was like, this is fascinating. And this is actually an expectation from a lot of social natives. So, yeah, apparently you can. I haven't done it, but I might do it soon.
I'll download my dating app tomorrow. But I think that whole area of personalization, I don't subscribe to the echo chamber risks, because I think people are more savvy than that, generally speaking. And I do believe that, if you come to a site and you're not interested in certain bits of content, then why should you be served that in today's age? So in the whole area of era of supply and demand, etc. Why would I go to a site where I can see everything and have to find my content, whereas I could go to another site and it understands me and shows me the content that I'm interested in. And I think that's definitely going to become more and more a thing, if you like, as people become more sophisticated in the type of content that they want. I suppose the only danger to that would be if as a news brand, you only serve the audience that's the content that you've already got. So, and your audience, you've only got one bit of audience. So so what do you think, Francesca? How do you think you can reach out and find new audiences, and then try to diversify your offering to attract different audiences? How can you even begin to start to understand that?
I think personally there's a bit of what you were saying at the beginning, which is the mission. One of the things that we try and do and that we focus on so much is when we're publishing on social media and when we're creating content that is reach style content that is going to, using all of the usual tricks of the trades to be able to get reach. It's about giving valid reasons for people to come back to our site and to our own platforms. And the clickbait isn't necessarily the only thing that makes people act. And I think we need a stronger understanding of motivation and what makes people act. And part of what makes people act is what you were saying at the beginning, is what makes people care and the why they should be coming back. So there is a piece which is, talking about why the news is important, but also sometimes one of the examples that we even had on the podcast was a brand that asked people to join them in a challenge, which was to stop cutting the grass in their garden and to leave natural things in their garden to get the insects to come back and to watch how that changes over time. So they made this amazing piece on social media that went out to everyone asking for people to join them in this challenge. And
Fantastic.
I think it was so good. I loved that example. And I think there is a piece of asking people to join you in something, but the why is so, so important to that. It's not just, for me at least, about you saying, hey, send us a photo. It's, we want to create something special and we need you to do that. And if people are interested in those topics and they think that they're contributing to something a bit bigger than them, that makes a massive difference, in my opinion.
I love that. Yeah. So the why is really, it's a really good question to ask yourself, so, and I do that through user needs as well, in a way. So we start off with saying, who is it we're trying to reach? And we do a lot of work with that. So, okay, well, who is the audience? And then we say, and why are they coming to us? What is it that they want to find out? So, is it that they want to, the answer to a question? So are they coming via search? Or, why are they coming to us? Is it because they want to be entertained and diverted? And if you go back to the Reuters report, which Reuters has been saying for years now about news avoidance, we are so rubbish at understanding the fact that people don't want to have day after day listening to the fires in LA, which is ravaging Los Angeles at the moment, and it's there is no solutions journalism attached to that, and so therefore the diet of news that's being sent out at the moment is just it's almost like a broadcast mode, again saying these fires are terrible and people's lives are being devastated, etc. And there's nothing else apart from the way that we are reporting that content. But there's got to be some really good stories to be had with the people that are doing brilliant work, the people who helping people off the streets, etc. And what I'm saying from the user need is that people, although it's a really devastating, serious news event, people probably want to be diverted from that as well. They want some distraction, etc. And so, why are people coming to us? Okay, they're coming to find out what the latest of the LA fires are, but they're probably also saying, I want to be distracted from it as well, because it's just this daily drumbeat of doom and gloom. And so, we do the why bits, and so why are people coming, and then we get to how. Okay, so you've done your, what do people want? Why they're coming to you, how do you then create that content? And it may well be that says, okay, well, we don't need to write this content anymore. We'll produce a video, or we'll do it as a blog, or we'll do it as a newsletter, and we'll distribute it via social or whatever. And I think, so that's how I do my user needs methodology, is to say, okay, understand your brand, understand, what content people want from you, why they're coming to you, and then how are you going to reach them in a place where they want to be reached. And I think, so it's similar to what you're saying about, if we're going to ask for pictures, why do we want those pictures? We've got to ask ourselves as journalists as to why do people come to our site, and what can we do to make sure we're providing them with what they want on the platform that they want it.
And there could be many whys, because people the action might be the same, but the reason is different as well. I think I used to work in marketing with football brands, and they always talk about, you might all be Nottingham Forest fans, but the reason you're Nottingham Forest fans and the reason that you go to a game might be completely different. Some people are just there for the winning. Some people are there because their favourite footballer's there. Some people are there because their granddad did it. And there's a sense of nostalgia. So the people act because they care and they feel. And we need to almost not just talk about why are people doing, but what emotion is getting them to do these actions? Is it fear? Is it distraction? Is it, well, distraction being an emotion, but is it, there are so many emotions behind that as well. And those are conversations that we should be having as editorial teams all the time.
Yeah, and I'll tell you who does that really well is the news movements. So, they're set up as they're very much looking at the Gen Z, are moving to Gen Alpha. Frighteningly enough, there's another one behind them. Yes. And, they are very unashamedly, we are a young person's platform. But they're not just producing young person's content, they're actually asking those questions. So, okay, why, how can we help you to understand the world? How can we help you to interact with things? And there's a global community which they've developed. So Gen Z people very much see news from a world perspective rather than their own small community, and the news movement have really made a success of the way that they identify that and how they present that content to their audience.
It's making me think of, we're giving so many great examples, and obviously this conversation is so important. If you were to talk to a brand today and you were going to give them, a hack, they're starting from scratch, they're really looking at what they need to be doing. As my last question to you, really, if anything, what would you say the one thing they should do is? One hack for me.
Well,
it's a big question.
If they're not doing anything, they should first of all start and then say, well, where do we start? And I think, I would go down to one where you don't need to use any technology. So you use your brand strength. And I would say that what I would get them to do is say, tell us what news event you want us to cover. It's a simple hack like that. So create a simple prompt to ask your audience to submit a topic that's important to them, that you want them, that they want you to investigate and to cover, and frame it as a collaborative effort. So you'll begin to really get that engagement going on. So it could well be, let's take something around the local park, and it's been run down, etc. Okay, ask them to come up with ideas about what should happen to that local park. So we're talking really, really micro level here, real hyper local. And then you promise that you will publish their answers, and then what you can then do, then you can get more sophisticated with it, and you can get people to upvote it, etc. So, okay, well, these are the 3 story ideas we've had from the park. Which one do you want us to investigate the most? And you can gamify it a little bit and get people to upvote it. And then you use all the user comments that are coming in, etc. So you build a whole community around one story idea, one topic idea, and you start from that, and you just measure that success. How engaged people get. Then you can do follow-ups on it. You can ask. Then you can have an event around it, etc. You can invite people into your newsroom, or you can go to that park and say, okay, right, we're now going to have, come and meet us, get your big red sofa down on the park or whatever. But it's a really simple, if you haven't put your toe in the water yet about engagement, okay, and you're a little bit, okay, well, where do we get started? Well, ask your readers what you'd like, what they would like you to be covering.
And it potentially will save you massive amount of time not creating content that people might not have been interested in the first place.
Yeah. And you can use some really simple stuff. You can use a Google form, for example, and just say, on this form, give us, put in questions that you'd like us to ask someone. Okay, you could do it. We're going to be having an interview with the police crime commissioner. Mm-hmm. Tell us the questions you'd like us to ask the police crime commissioner. And then you just get a list of their questions. You've got their names for it. You do the interview. You can feedback the answers. Some really simple stuff you can do.
Love it. Love it so much. Thank you so much for that. Jeremy, that was fantastic. Thank you so much really for your time. Yeah. And let's move engagement forward across the world. Hopefully we'll get there.
Well, it's the if you go back to the Reuters report, it's the one of the biggest things that they've come out in terms of their findings is that you're beginning to see more and more publishers, wanting to engage with audiences more, and the biggest challenge they're facing is how do you engage with the holy grail, which is the younger audience, etc. So I would like to see in 2025, we're in January 2025 now, I'd like to see some really good product innovations around that, and some real successes.
I would too. Definitely. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Great talking to you, Francesca. Thank you.